And we're joined by Scott Prather of ESPN1420 and the Great Scott Show in Lafayette. Scott, we just got done talking about it a little bit. This has been a busy time for you. How are you doing? Are you holding up pretty well?
And yeah, well, when the Pelicans lose by 30 to the T-Wolves, not really, but when they just, come out and dominate one of the better defensive teams in the league, then I'm doing well. So I try to watch as many games as I can, but I get so busy sometimes I can't. And even though they're a topic on the show often, the Pelicans are also kind of an escape at times because I don't know, it's hard to explain. There's a lot of sports I have to watch that feel like work, and sometimes with the Pelicans it does, but a lot of times it feels like an escape. So when they're just it's crazy how they can be so frustrating 1 minute and just like the most fun team to watch like 24 hours later. It's like they're really are Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. That's the New Orleans Pelicans.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I was going to ask you about to start off. Coming off this awesome win last night against one of the best teams in the Western Conference, the Los Angeles Clippers, win over the Cavs on Friday, who are a young, kind of up and coming team. And then that horrible, horrible loss to the T-Wolves on Thursday to start the second half of the season. You've been around this franchise for a long time, covering them since they moved to New Orleans as the Hornets. Can you remember a team as confusing as this Pelicans team in the lore of New Orleans history with basketball?
No. I mean, not even close. I feel like every team, when they would play a certain way, you could always find like an explanation. And with this one, it's other than youth, but like there are plenty of young teams over the years that didn't, go from the Washington Generals one night and transition to the Globetrotters the next. Like, Monty Williams' teams always played hard. Byron Scott didn't like to play young players. The team eventually turned on him. He was good for a while though. Tim Floyd could never coach a team above 500, even though they were talented. Paul Silas in the first years of the team, they were just in such a transition, didn't know really their identity, and they had young core. I mean, you could go year in, year out and find, okay, this is why on some nights they're good, some nights they're bad. Other than youth, there's really not much explanation here why they can just lock in defensively one night, not the next. But it's not that, it's the extreme nature of it where it's like, it's got to be something more than just youth. Like it's too extreme, and therefore I can't think of any team, over the last 18 plus seasons, 19, almost 19 years, that Hornets / Pelicans team that was this confounding at times. But you never know what you're going to get. So you tune in and you watch them play Portland tomorrow night, and who knows? But one thing I think that we can at least, for the most part, expect is Zion to just be a blast. So, aside from like the awful 30-point loss to the T-Wolves, even in the other losses, like Zion still, from an offensive standpoint, is just, to me, it's worth the price of admission. Like that alone is just so much fun to watch. And, people get frustrated when he's constantly being compared to players of the past or, under a microscope at 20 years old. Like I try not to get caught up in that, man. I'm just having fun with it because he does that. I think I put on Twitter the other night, like an E Honda gif, because he really is like, there's no basketball comparison. So I just used a Street Fighter character that was a sumo wrestler with abs and could just like take flight for like, short burst and go 0 to 60. But that really is like Zion, just this, there's no comparison in my mind in terms of just the body type and the speed at which he moves in like an instant. And he's just fun, man. I can't get enough Zion right now. It's awesome.
I think that is probably going to be the most apropos comparison. I mean, we've been hearing Charles Barkley. We've heard that since he came into the league. It's Shaq. Like if there's an actual basketball comparison, It's got to be Shaq, right? And I think now that you're going video game route, I thought Bo Jackson Tecmo Bowl, just unstoppable, man. Just unstoppable.
I don't know that he's that good. I mean,
okay.
MJ wasn't Bo Jackson Tecmo Bowl, bro. I mean, there's been nothing like it. No, I like it, man. I like it. He's he's just, He's one of one. And that doesn't mean he's like the best player in the league right now, but he's one of one in that I just don't think there's that real basketball comparison. I mean, Shaq's good, but Shaq was just taller. Young Shaq was slimmer than, obviously the older Shaq, and Shaq's power was probably a little greater, but like Shaq didn't move. And I watched Shaq when he was at LSU, and he moved well. I mean, I went to games at the PMAC back when he was there and watched him with the Magic and then all the other teams he ended up playing for. But I've never seen a player that size like Zion go from 0 to 60 in an instant. The first, I was at his debut last year, and that, I remember, like, what stood out to you the most? And that was it. Like, seeing it in person, that's what I always go back to. How quickly he can, like, there's no, it's not like he needs momentum to get rolling. He can just take off, like, just like a rabbit or something. It's crazy to see a guy that size move like that, and nobody wants to take a charge from that guy. Like, and I don't blame him. I mean, you gotta, no. At some point, you got to make a business decision and just get out the way.
I was just going to say that we've seen so many business decisions this time around this year. And so, his performance on top of the explosiveness and the 0 to 60, it's the touch. It's the touch for a guy that big who can move like that. Like, around the rim, to be that soft-handed is insane for the type of body composition he has. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's why there's just no one quite like him. I mean, you to finish, first of all, he kind of like, glide is not the right word. He doesn't glide. He hangs in the air. Like, once he gets to the top, it's not like all this body weight just in the gravity immediately pulls him down. It always feels like he's hanging in the air, like an extra tenth of a second longer than whoever the opponent is, and then could just make a decision on the fly. And more times than not, it's the right one. Like, more, I think, what was it on the Old Man and the Three podcast when JJ Redick was like, there's no player in the league that gets up in the air and isn't sure what they're going to do, but the end result is successful more often than Zion Williamson does. And there's probably something to that, because he probably doesn't always know the exact, am I going left? Am I going over the top? He just, like, he hangs in the air and waits to see what opens up. And then like that, he makes the decision, and, it's usually the shot. It's usually not the pass, but when it is the shot, it's usually going in.
And one more thing to add about the amazing show that Zion has been so far in his NBA career is that, I mean, I think it's clear that he loves basketball. Like, we've seen incredible talents that just aren't there, that aren't as invested in the game as we'd like them to be. But Zion's 20 and he's in it for the game. I mean, a lot of guys in the NBA are in it for the lifestyle too. And Zion's in it for the game of basketball. He loves it. And you can hear it when he's on podcasts like the Old Man and the Three, when he's talking about different actions, like the actions that he and JJ have been running. And I think it's very clear that he loves the game of basketball.
Yeah. And I think he's got a high basketball IQ for just a 20-year-old. And I think, barring injury, I hate to even say it, but barring injury, I mean, the ceiling, we don't know what the ceiling is yet. And that's what's so exciting about it. And, all the hype coming into the league and all the dunks. And it's just somehow I felt like the expectation was too high because it wasn't possible to hit what, and in some regards, I guess he hasn't, but for the most part, if you were realistic about the hype, you could admit to yourself that in some ways, he's at least met it, or in some cases surpassed it. Last year was last year, the injuries, all that, I get it. But, the 17 and 22, but Zion Williamson's, you feel better about, as frustrating and confounding as the team can be night in, night out, you still feel great about the future for a number of reasons, but number one on that list is number one, and that's Zion.
Yep, exactly. So now that we're talking a little bit more about this confusion that we were talking about a little bit earlier on, do you see this team anything other than, intensity and effort that we've seen? That's the big deal that we've seen between games, is if we can get continuity between that, every single game this team is going to compete. They're going to play with the best of them, like they did last night with the Clippers. Is there anything else that has stuck out to you about, like, that's what they're doing that wins? This specific player, when he has a good game, they tend to win. We know Zion's going to win, or going to compete every single night, going to play well every single night. But is there anything else other than that continuity between energy and effort on the defensive end that sticks out to you that you're like, that is what's winning them games?
Well, obviously, when Lonzo Ball plays at a high level, they're a different team. when they have somebody that can get hot from the outside because they don't have a lot of great outside shooting, and Redick's on the shelf for a while. But I think the bigger question mark to me, Elliot, is like, why is it, right? It's easy to say, oh, it's the excuse me, oh, it's Stan Van and it's the coach and they got to come out. I mean, there could be some deeper things at play, because I was talking with my friend Gus Cadgill about this last week, and David Griffin, when he I guess he did that online Q&A, and he almost kind of like snapped a little bit when was asked by Graf. Say snapped. I mean, if you heard it, call it whatever you want, but I felt like he, in a kind of undertone type of way, kind of snapped when Graf was asking him about, why aren't you playing, some of the younger players more, whatever. And he was like, look, they got to earn it, and it's what we see in practice, and they need to earn it in practice. And it's like, okay, but you've only got 11 practices left in the season, and you have 64 games, something like that. Like, when are they going to earn it? Like, when do you expect them to do it in practice? And my guess is in practice, when you have only 11, like, how much are you spending working with specifically just young players? Like, how much do they, you've seen it different Jackson Hayes. Who knows if it's sustainable, but he got benched, and, Billy came in and did a good job. And now you've seen Jackson, he had 7 blocks all season. Now he's at 8 in the month of March, and we're only halfway through it. You're just seeing a different kind of player. Maybe it's the spark, but you feel like he and Nikhil and Kyra and these guys, you want to see more of a run. And, Bledsoe can be very frustrating at times. I get it. But is there some kind of disconnect between Griffin and Van Gundy, because everyone said when Gail hired David, she gave him full autonomy. Does that mean it's full autonomy with the head coach? Is it, hey, we really need to focus more on these guys? Because you can say the coaches are calling the shots all you want. We know. I mean, go ask Alvin Gentry about everything when he was there and how they handled Zion. I mean, it's just not always the case. I'm sure Stan Van has a lot of I'm sure he has, for the most part, can do what he wants, but maybe not 100%. Is it, hey, play these older guys a little more, these young guys? I don't know. If you look at Stan Van historically, it's not like he's played a ton of rookies in his career. So I try to analyze more, even though I don't know the answer, what's happening outside of, game day that's making them come out. Because we like to simplify it so much. Oh, they just overlooked the T-Wolves because they're bad, or oh, they're just tired because of this, or oh, I mean, I feel like it's probably a little deeper than that, because as we were saying earlier in the conversation, it's such an extreme. It's not like, well, they came out, they overlooked the team, and they lost by a few points, too little, too late. No, I mean, you get beat by 30 to a team that's just above a G League team, and then you shoot the best percentage in a game in the NBA this season by a lot against one of the best defensive teams in the league. Yeah. So the extremes of it make me think it's probably deeper than just, well, the coach needs to do this, or they need to, or it's just youth. I'm speculating. I don't know if there's this disconnect between the front office, the team, the staff. I have no idea. But I think it's more than just, hey, they're young, or hey, the coach is doing a bad job. I don't think it's never as simple as, as much as we'd like to admit, as much as, it's never as simple as NBA Twitter makes it out to be. It just isn't.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the thing about that too, in terms of it being deeper than we all think, I mean, when we had Jamel McMillan on the show, I don't even know what that was, probably like 2 months ago. I mean, SVG had to come in and tear everything down, and he's been given very minimal time to really build back up between the camp and then, like you said, only 11 practices for the remainder of the season. I don't know how many they had in the first half, but I mean, the guy's just been given so little time. We're in the middle of a pandemic, all of these other things that you factor into what's going into this season. And it makes sense with the highs and lows, but I mean, we're not really seeing that as far as I know. I mean, I'm not paying attention to other teams as much as I am the Pels, but I don't think we're seeing that drastically with these other teams. And I think that's where the youth comes in right there. Is it a factor? Yeah. Is it everything? No.
Yeah. And you mentioned COVID. I mean, go back to the game, I think it was January 23rd, where they lost to Minnesota's G League team. That was bad, but they were they were on day 14 of a road trip during a pandemic, when you're not even allowed to go into your like teammates' hotel room to like play cards. Like, you literally are only around them when you travel. You're supposed to be 6 feet away and wear a mask. So you're not, this team with a lot of new faces has not been able to interact as much as they would like to, I'm sure. But, it'd be one thing if, okay, it's pandemic, you can't really go out, so you better get close to each other. But it's not that simple. It's like, you can't even really do that. You're being advised to, unless you're practicing, don't go hang out at the hotel. Don't do this. So I would imagine, the psyche for somebody that's trying to, play in the NBA, and you're on a 2-week road trip away from home, and you're just either playing or stuck in your hotel, that can be exhausting. That's not to make an excuse for that performance, that night. And there's certainly not one for the one last week against Minnesota. But the COVID aspect of this season, you see it in sports, right? Teams that have a lot of continuity and veteran leadership seem to be handling it the most. Whether it be, the Dodgers or the Lakers when they won, Tom Brady being a veteran, all that stuff. If you want to bring up the Bucks or March Madness this week, there are a lot of blue bloods didn't even make the tournament this year. And I think the reason is you got Kentucky, Duke, whatever. I mean, you got Duke's not in it. You got these blue bloods, and even the ones that are in it, like in North Carolina, they're an 8 seed or a 9 seed, I think. I think that your schools that are more one and done heavy, your blue bloods that can do that because they're just that good. When a year like COVID, you needed that veteran leadership more than ever. You needed that continuity more than ever, and you didn't have your normal schedule to build, to build a roster that's only going to be together. I mean, every roster is only together for 1 year, but you know what I mean? With some one and done players, you didn't really have that normal luxury. And I think you see it in college as well. A lot of the teams that have had a lot of success and are higher seeds in the tournament, they've got a lot of continuity. And when your longest tenured player is a 20-year-old in Zion Williamson, I think that tells you everything you didn't know about the continuity of the team. And to your point, Elliot, it's still like you're very early in the process, and I get it, right? You want to win, and I can be guilty of it at times when it's so frustrating. Like growing pains, I think you can deal with. I think it's the lack of effort that just becomes insanely frustrating for fans. But you're really early in this process. Where are you at from a year from now, and more than that, where are you at 2 years from now? And that, I think, is when you can give a definitive letter grade, or if you want to give a pass or fail. But giving Stan Vander, this team, or even David Griffin, who's I think deservedly been taking a little more heat lately than he was at any point prior to his time in New Orleans. I think the definitive pass fail, we're a long way away from being able to do that. At this point, I think, it's fair to analyze the team and dissect it, but to go ahead and say, there's no way this team can do this or that as if they're year 5 in this process, I think it's silly. Now,
as we transition to the trade deadline, this is going to be a part where a lot of people are going to start to say pass fail. That's for sure. People are definitely starting to get impatient, and especially with the moves that Griff made this offseason, bringing in Steven Adams, bringing in Eric Bledsoe, acquiring all those picks. Are there any moves you'd like the Pels to make this trade deadline? Do you think they should wait? Do you think they should just let those guys on expiring contracts go, i.e. JJ Redick, i.e. Lonzo Ball? I don't want them to trade Lonzo. I'd like them to try to extend him this offseason. But the conversation has been surrounding JJ Redick mostly, and then possibly Eric Bledsoe. You see any teams out there, any players out there that look available to you that you're like, that guy would be awesome for this Pels team?
Well, I look more at who's not. I think trade Eric Bledsoe. Like for me, it's like he's not a fit. And I said that when they traded for him. I think Bledsoe has value in the league. It doesn't seem like it's the right fit when they did it. And I think more times than not, it doesn't feel like the right fit this year. There was some speculation out there. I mean, you saw him play last night, right? Luke Kennard of the Clippers, maybe a Bledsoe for Kennard deal. I don't know. I mean, okay. I mean, it's not like I'm this huge Kennard guy. I like that deal more for I just like that deal more for making some space and some room for some of the younger guys. But Bledsoe, Kennard, he's a 3-point shooter, right? He shot really high when, during his time with the Pistons from 3-point range. I say really high. It was good. He's not anybody that's going to come in and light the world on fire. But for me, that move would be more about moving on from Bledsoe than anything else. I think for Ball, I think you got to wait. For Redick, it's a matter of, Ball, that's the decision in the offseason. That's going to be, it's probably going to be the one that's discussed and dissected the most. But I want to see more of Lonzo, honestly. But for Redick, I wouldn't mind that either, because look, if you can't get in as a top 10 team in the West this year, like, do you keep Redick around because you think he might get you into, the play-in game in the postseason? Is that worth it? Or is getting young assets worth it in return? I don't know, because the players, it's with the focus being on Redick on the court, and he hasn't had the season when he's healthy, and he's not currently on the court that many had hoped for. You hear the players talk about his value in the locker room. We've used the word youth probably 20 times already in this interview. So Redick's an interesting one. I think you really need to find a suitor for Bledsoe, whether it's Luke Kennard. I know some people say, hey, trade Bledsoe and some young picks for Aaron Gordon in Orlando, and New Orleans likes him a lot. I mean, I guess you want to get more strength. I like the idea of Gordon's defense. Offensively, though, you're not thinking, oh, he's going to pull up and stretch the floor, which is something this team needs. So every conceivable realistic deal you could come up with, I think, has some pros and cons. But with respect to Bledsoe, he's not part of the long-term plan. Redick isn't either, but Redick's probably going to retire after the season anyway. So it's what do you get in return? Probably, someone at the end of a bench for a contender who's not getting any time. How valuable could that be long-term? It's debatable. But whether it's Bledsoe for Kennard or someone for Aaron Gordon, I don't think the Pelicans are going to be quite as busy at the trade deadline, I think, as many people are anticipating. And I definitely don't think Lonzo Ball is about to get traded, which you're going to see, to 3 teams Ball could get traded to, this or that, but he's not going anywhere. I think the big question obviously is the extension and what you do with that. And I know you're high on keeping him. I'm not quite there yet. I mean, I like the idea of keeping him, but some of the numbers that have been thrown out there, it's just, man, that's a decision I'm glad I don't have to make, put it that way.
Yeah, me too. I'm not all for paying him $23 million a year or anything like that. Definitely not. Yeah, got to see a little more consistency if we're going to go all the way there. But he is having probably the best season of his career so far, especially if you boil it down to these last few months. Obviously had a rough start, but what was he shooting, like 46% from 3 in February?
Yeah.
Something crazy like that. So he's really molded himself into that sort of 3-and-D player when he started off his career, and pretty much his whole basketball career as being a point guard. So he's really filled into what SVG wants him to do.
It's crazy that, like, he's only 23 is the thing. It's just because he's entering the end of his rookie deal at that age. It's like the idea, well, you can't pay him this much, but you also, like, does anyone out there believe we've seen the best of Lonzo Ball? He's 23, but how much higher is that ceiling, and how much can you actually invest? Because, like, I hope Josh Hart stays. I mean, I hope, because I think he could get some offers. I hope he ends up staying. I love Josh Hart. He became a fan favorite before he even played with the team, because this team's history of rejection from players not wanting to be there. Suddenly this guy, like, embraces it. Oh, and by the way, he just busts his ass on the court all the time. And I do think, I think he's a good guy to have if you're trying to build a certain culture. So I really hope Josh Hart stays. I mean, you never know in the NBA, man. Some team might just throw a bunch of money out there, and if they bring Lonzo back, that might be the cost of it, not being able to keep Josh Hart. But I hope Josh Hart's a Pelican for like 10 years. I hope he's one of those guys that you could wear a number 3 jersey, like, many, many years from now. And I guess you can at this point with Chris Paul, but it has to be Hornets. But I hope you can wear like an old, Pelicans number 3 jersey, and 10, 20 years from now, and real Pelicans fans will be like, I dig it, man. That's it. That's the one. Yeah, I mean, you can't do that after a COVID, shortened season and this one right now. But if his next contract is to stay with the team and they experience unprecedented success, which for this team's history, that would just be maybe getting to the conference finals once. They've never done that. But if he's there with them for that ride, I think he'll end up being that guy. But he might not be on the team next year. So I don't want to get too attached yet, Elliot.
Right. Yeah, I feel you. So mentioned that Orlando trade, Aaron Gordon, Nikola Vucevic. I'll have an article coming out later today, if not tomorrow, on that. We won't get too deep in it here today, but just a couple more questions before you go, Scott. We know you're a busy man. So Drew Brees announcing his retirement yesterday. What has his career meant to you as a lifelong Saints fan? I know you're a Saints historian as well. I'm very excited to see him on NBC Sports too. How are you feeling about that?
Well, I as somebody that grew up going to Saints games with my family, and my mom's from New Orleans and was at the first game ever, and season tickets since I've been alive, saw a lot of bad football, man. 39 years of the franchise, one playoff win before he got there, and since 2006, the season tickets have been sold out every year with a waiting list. There was never a moment. I mean, you dreamed about like a Super Bowl as a Saints fan, but it just seemed like this. It just seemed like this. It was inconceivable. Like it was just, you can't. That'll never happen, or there's just no way. This team, the history, they're not taken serious. Whatever. And Brees basically, when he got there, and he wasn't celebrated when he got signed. Some people were excited, but no one thought, hey, 15 years from today, he's going to retire and he's going to be the all-time leader in passing yards, and the Saints will have a Super Bowl. No one would have been like, oh yeah, right. So the run was incredible. Try to quantify what he means to a fan base is really hard to do, honestly. But it was the first time, as a lifer that followed a team, that I actually really felt like a lot of years, like Saints can win the Super Bowl this year. And it wasn't just this, fandom faith. It was based in reality. And it's hard to explain what the 2009 Super Bowl meant for like Saints fans that have, generations of Saints fans and their family that actually just stuck with him and went through all of this. So I don't know, man. I mean, obviously he's done a lot of philanthropic work, but what he means to that city, that team, it's incredible. It's incredible. And I don't, I get that the Pelicans are, number 2 in the city, but I always tell people, man, you start getting, like I said, the Saints had never had, they had sold out games before. Don't get me wrong, Elliot, but season tickets sold out with a waiting list. That had never happened. And then in 2006, it was like this fear of losing the team sort of brought the fan base even closer. And then that got coupled with just this incredible, unprecedented run over the last 15 years. Yeah, with some hiccups in there, but for the most part, just memorable games, breaking records more than anything. That Super Bowl in 2009 was just, it was magical, man. It really was something. So I hope the Pelicans can have a magical season. I mean, at this point, the best season in the history of this franchise was 56 wins and an exit in Game 7 of the quarterfinals, which is awful because, God, they were so good that year, and they matched up well with the Lakers. And I wish they could have at least gotten to the conference finals, and then who knows what would have happened after that. But that 07-08 Hornets season, man, it was magical in a lot of ways, but they weren't able to build off of it. It was just, let me tell you something, the latter part of that season, Chris Paul saved basketball in New Orleans because they had to hit all these attendance numbers. And if they don't hit it, George Shin's bouncing. Now, he didn't have a lot of money, so he couldn't pay the fee it would take to relocate. He wouldn't have to pay that fee had they not hit this attendance number. City's still recovering from Katrina, right? Their first season back on a full-time basis after 2 years, for the most part, in OKC. And Paul I thought he was the MVP that year. I know Kobe got it. Kobe should have got it the year before when Nash got his second. But it was even here in Lafayette, man, people were buzzing about the team. And so it was heartbreaking that they lost in Game 7, but there was a lot of anticipation going into the 08-09 season, and it all just fell apart. I mean, even though they went to the playoffs the next year, they tried to trade Chandler, who was a fan favorite, who was a core piece for luxury tax purposes. Deal got rescinded. It made things awkward, but that was kind of the beginning of the end, because I think at that point, Chris Paul and David West knew, like, well, shoot, it's not about winning. It's about something else in this small market more than winning. And then once, I don't even blame Chris Paul for wanting out. I mean, they didn't even have an owner. So the franchise is a much more stable footing now, Elliot. But I really feel like the Pelicans can have a magical run, just an incredible postseason run, and build off of it, and not just go into the next season and take a big step back and just kind of float around and every now and then have a good year, but for the most part, sink. I mean, that's a lot like the Saints. Every now and then I say every now and then they suck for 20 years. And then they had some good years, and then they went back to not being good. Then they had one good year, and then they were bad again. And then this Breeze thing happened. So sustainable success, in the postseason, I think that's the key to this franchise. Really, it's grown, but to really latch on to all of like the region, I think that's what you need more than anything else. And to do that, you need a transcendent player. I think Zion is a transcendent player. So at this point, man, I just hope for that success, because following this team, this franchise, the Hornets / Pelicans for so many years, it's like people are like, why do you do it? I'm like, it's a good question, because one, I guess I could say it's my job, but I don't know, man. At some point, right, it's all going to come together. I saw it happen with the Saints. At some point, it's going to happen for this team.
He is Scott Prather at Scott_1420 on Twitter, host of the Great Scott Show on ESPN1420 in Lafayette. You can find that on ESPN. Whoa, excuse me. ESPN.
I got you emotional. I got you choked up.
On ESPN1420.com, 7 to 9 a.m. on ESPN1420 in Lafayette. And of course, you can find it on all platforms you listen to your podcast, correct? Spotify, Google Play, etc. Or just Apple Podcasts?
Spotify, Anchor, Google Play. It's not on iTunes, but yeah, hit me up on Spotify. That's a good one.
It is definitely on iTunes. I've listened to it on iTunes.
On iTunes,
so there you go.
Well, the latest.
That's
new, I guess. I knew some of my older ones were. I got an email saying that it was no longer, but apparently it is. So that's good to know. Thank you. I learned something. I'll push it.
There you go. Thanks again, Scott. Really appreciate it.
All right, man. All the best, Elliot.